In this video, we are going to discuss about threads and differences between single tasking and multitasking, thread lifecycle, uses of threads, and how to create a thread and run it. A thread represents a separate path of execution of a group of statements. In a Java program, if you write a group of statements, then these statements are executed by JVM one by one. So this execution is called a thread, because JVM uses a thread to execute these statements. So this means that every Java program, there is always a thread running internally. So this thread is used by JVM to execute the program statements. Now let's see what is this thread. So I need a Java project. So new Java project. Project name is thread samples. In this thread sample, I would like to create a class called current within a package com.educators. With a public static void main method. So this program, we are just finding the thread used by JVM to execute the statements. So for that, I would write the first statement as system.out.println. Let us find the current thread. So thread is basically a class. Thread dot current thread would give us the details of the thread running internally. So what is that current thread and all? Just we'll see. And its name is like t dot get name. It gives us the thread's name. So let's execute, run as Java application. So this is the first statement which we have printed. Let us find the current thread. And when I have printed T, it is giving us thread main 5 comma main again. So our current thread name is the main. So when I call current thread is basically a class, and in which we have current thread as the static method. So to call that static method, I use the class name dot method name, that is thread dot current thread, which gives us the current thread details. So when I printed T, it is giving us thread main 5 comma main again. So here thread indicates that T is a thread class object, and the first main indicates the name of the thread running the current code, and we get 5, which is a number representing the priority of the thread. Every thread has got priority. The priority levels ranges from 1 to 10. 1 represents the minimum priority and 10 the maximum priority. So main is the default thread which is having the default priority as 5. And second main represents the thread group name to which this current thread belongs to. So thread group is nothing but it's a group of threads running as a single unit. So here when we are executing the statements, JVM is using a thread internally whose name is main with a priority 5 and which belongs to a thread group called main. So let's come back to the PPT. So this is what thread main 5 main represents. And the way the statements are executed in a program is of two types. One is single tasking and The other is multitasking. In a single tasking, only one task is given to the processor at a time. So let us take an example of a student who goes to the lab to write some programs. So he types his first program. It may take around 10 minutes. When he is typing the program, the processor is sitting idle without any work. After typing is completed, he gives the program to the processor. The processor executes it within a millisecond. Suppose if the student has written a program of 100 lines, the processor will not take more than a fraction of a second to complete its execution. After verifying the results, the students has started typing the second program. It may take another 10 to 15 minutes. Within this time, the processor sits idle waiting for the job. So when the student submits a second program, then it works for a fraction of a second on the program. Again, it goes into the idle state. So we can understand that the processor is sitting idle without any work for most of the time in single tasking. That is the drawback of single tasking. Coming to the multitasking, here tasks are executed. That is, processor executes the tasks at a time. The processor is not at all idle in multitasking. For example, if there are 4 tasks to be executed, the processor is given 4 tasks. So the processor will divide the memory into 4 parts. For example, if all the four parts are to be completed within a second, the processor divides the time into 4 parts. For example, it works for the first task for 1/4 millisecond, then it leaves the intermediate results into a buffer and enters into the second task. Second task, it also executes again for 1/4 milliseconds. If the work is done, it's fine. If it is not completed, leaves the intermediate results into a buffer and goes to the third task. Third task also processor executes for 1/4 millisecond. Leaving an intermediate results into the buffer, it enters into the fourth tasks. Like this, against the fourth task is also completed for 1/4 millisecond. It leaves the intermediate results into a buffer and again comes to the first task and starts its execution from the point from where it has left earlier. So this is called round robin V. Processor executes several jobs at a time in a round robin manner. This is called multitasking. So there are 2 types of multitasking again, process-based multitasking and thread-based multitasking. Process-based means several programs are executed at a time, whereas thread-based means several parts of the same program are executed using threads. For example, if I have a program which is having 3 methods, so each method will be executed by a separate thread. That means 3 threads are required to execute these 3 methods. So this is called thread-based multitasking. So threads are always lightweight because they utilize minimum resources of the system and they take less memory and also less processor time. And threads are basically used in server-side programs to handle several clients and also used to create games and animation. Coming to the life cycle, the thread life cycle is always controlled by the JVM internally. So there are basically 4 life cycle states called new, runnable, non-runnable and terminated. But for our understanding, to have a better understanding, we have divided the states into 5. So running is the another state. So what is new state here is when we create an instance of a thread class. But before invocation of the start method, the thread enters into a new state. After the invocation of start method, the thread enters into the runnable state. But here the thread scheduler has not selected it to be the running thread. If the thread scheduler has selected it to be the running thread, then it enters into the running state. And if the thread is being interrupted by using either sleep method or a wait method or blocked for some IO, then the thread enters into the blocked state or non-runnable state. And then finally terminated state, the thread enters into the terminated state only when its run method exits, the thread method would be entered into the terminated state. This is the picture of it. New, that is when we create an instance of thread class but before the invocation of start method. When the thread invokes the start method, it enters into the runnable state. But here the thread scheduler has not selected it to be the running thread. If it selects it to be the running thread, then it enters into the running state. And then if it is blocked for some IO or for sleep or wait, then it enters into the blocked state or non-runnable state. After sleep is done, that is after a specified amount of time has been elapsed, then it enters into the runnable state. And finally, when run method exists, the thread enters into the terminated state. This is the thread life cycle. So how do we create a thread and run it? The first thing is we need to create a class which extends thread or implements runnable interface. And then we need to write public void run method. So thread is basically a class and runnable is an interface. So both has got its own run method, that is public void run. When a class is extending thread, that means we are overriding run method. When a class is implementing runnable interface, then we are implementing the run method. So run is the default method which is executed by the thread. Then we need to create an object to the my class and pass that object to the thread. That is, attach an object to the thread by using thread class. Finally, start the thread by using start method. So let's see an example of it. So here I would just create class called demo1, which is having main method and in com.educators. So before that, I need to create a class extends thread class. So for that, I say class myThread extends thread. In this, I need to write run method. So that is public void run. So here I am just, the thread executes this run method. So for now, I am just writing a for loop, which is just printing the values from 1 to 1 lakh. I equals to 1. I less than lakh, I plus plus system.out.println the value of I. Now in the main method, I need to create an object to the my thread. My thread object name is obj equals to new my thread, and then create a thread and attach this object. Thread t equals to new thread, attach this obj. Finally start the thread using start method. So now this thread will execute the code inside run method of my thread object. So let's run and check. Run as Java application, you can see the values getting printed, right? So this is how we can execute the thread, create a thread and run the thread. For example, if I create something like this, you can see the numbers go on increasing. So if you want to terminate this, you can simply press Ctrl C or wait for it to be completed. So that's all with the session. Thank you.